NFC wildcard opening round match. Wendigo Wendy Hathel versus JJ Watson. Begin! Wendy's eyes narrowed and she cracked her knuckles in anticipation. Sighing. Alright, we're both clearly freaks of nature. How do you want to do this? JJ's smile widens and he leans down, leering at her. You think we can just tear each other apart without issue, don't you? He chuckles and licks his lips. You haven't realized yet that this isn't your home, little one. He looks to what I can only assume is an invisible camera only JJ can see and flashes a far too perfect grin, mechanical in its nature. The poor girl is so clueless, folks, but don't worry, JJ can remedy that stupidity. He laughs, shaking his head and slapping his forehead, repeatedly shouting, "Stupid, stupid," as his laughter grows more guttural, more manic. He drops to a knee and howls with glee. My goodness, my first true contest in a long time, and it's against a little girl who reminds me so much of my dear audience back home. It's almost ironic. I can't get away from them, how hard I try. And may as well say, honey, I'm home. Did you get me another failure? He laughs harder, getting off his feet to lunge at Wendy and pin her down, still laughing as his drool coats her head and mask. I felt sick watching it. Wendy, to her credit, was unperturbed. Man, you ever been told how much of a fucking creep you are? You reek of chemicals, look like a dollar store horror mannequin reject, and talk in such a creepy way that even a local pervert wouldn't touch you. But most of all, she pushes him off with great force and sends the laughing, drooling JJ smacking the canvas before he rights himself to stare at her. In that time, she darts forward and in an instant is across the side of the pit, clutching an ear in her hand and throwing it to the ground. As JJ continues howling with laughter, white fluid and pus trickling out of his ear. You're fucking disgusting, JJ, she quips, turning back around and extending her fingers. I'm staggered, but I proceed with enthusiasm. This truly is a blink, and you'll miss it about. This truly is a blink, and you'll miss it about, fight fans. Wendy Hathel clears half the pit in a split second and takes JJ's ear with her. Curious that she doesn't go to taste it, though. Not at all, if you consider that JJ isn't human, Neil replied, searching the contents page of her book for a particular entry, flicking through the pages until she stops under I. A detailed diagram of a spectral shape that shifts at will to scare townspeople laid bare for me to see. He's eye-gagging, a very special kind of trickster, god, that can shift her into anything to enact his cruelty. But his most common appearance, she trails off as JJ plays out on all fours and begins twitching while he laughed, his back hunched up and snapped, stretching out to form the long neck and thorax, a bulky abdomen housing an extra pair of spindly legs with gnarled hooks across the length of them. The front hands reaching up and bending towards to form the raptorial saw-like weaponry as his skin darkens and the carapace shimmers under the lights. Piercing silver antenna splits out of his head as the hair recedes and gives way to grotesque, bulging eyes, the jaw crunching, splitting, and gnashing as mandibles rapidly replaced the perfect teeth. He gurgles as his laughter gives way to hisses and growls. You are not in the hotel, just as I am not. Beneath the static, we are both vulnerable to the underlining jaws of death. I'm not willing to risk such a thing in front of a live audience, young one. I will tear you to pieces and show the world what lies beneath the static. He lunges forward and takes a swipe at her with his hooked claws, slicing the inside of her thigh as she darts back and ripping the skin, flecks of black blood coating the hooks as he chuckles, his body remaining still. Wendy landed as her leg gave out, looking at it expectantly, hoping it would fix itself. Instead, the blood continued to trail around her until she ripped away the torn fabric and wrapped it around her. If she was scared, she damn sure didn't show it. Well, I guess you're truthful about something, JJ, she said, breathing a little heavy from the blood loss, steadying herself as she rose to her feet. You know, we get cable in the hotel in Inerta. I'm aware of who you are and what you do, picking on teenagers for your own amusement. You really that much of a attention whore that you can't stay away? They'll grow up and come back stronger, you know. When you pick on someone your own size, you're always gonna lose. JJ didn't respond, swaying ever so lightly like a brittle leaf caught in a mild breeze. He was waiting to strike when Wendy pulled off her sweater and threw it aside, showing a thin stomach that almost caved in, wrapping her chest and ribcage, old wounds and scars littering her body. This is the result of countless fights, feedings and grueling fights, some at home with my adopted family, others with the Order of the 13th floor alongside my friends, the ones this fucking tournament ripped me away from at our crisis moment. You think you scare me? You think the idea of being torn up and actually dying scares me? She laughs, is hollow and bitter, like she's remembering the bright side of a vicious beating, is the unconscious state she'll fall into when the pain gets too much. You have no fucking idea. I'd be so happy to go to sleep and never wake up, to have that ceaseless hunger stop for just one day. Do you know what that kind of hunger does to someone? It makes an ordinary person angry on the first day, delirious on the second, and manic by the third. Now take what I am and multiply that number by thousands. Wendy takes off her mask and shows the gritted teeth biting on her lower lips so much that she's torn through the flesh, blood coating her chin as the teeth grow more spiked and the jaw grows larger. Her eyes blackening and skin graying, she grows taller, and the features of a once beautiful woman give way to a horrifying creature known for its insatiable lust for flesh. Crouching down like a sprinter at the starting line, she stares down her opponent like a piece of meat. So, just imagine what that's gonna do to you now. That I've let loose, JJ. I can't believe my eyes. In that moment, the reality of this situation hit me like a freight train, and I feel the innate fear of being a small fish in an ocean filled with sharks. I can't let my composure falter, not with Alduin's gaze bearing down on me. I take a long drink of water and tumble headfirst into my adrenaline. Amazing! Wendigo Wendy, living up to her name as she assumes a more terrifying form. This fight looks to be heading to its climax, folks. Expect blood and guts gore. I was right. Within 20 seconds, it was over. Wendy leaves great dents in the canvas as she tears forward. JJ swipes at her in the instant she comes into his range, his front forearm hooking into her flesh and pulling her in. She pushes forward, the skin tearing with the force of her movement, and an ungodly shriek emitting from her as she bites into the offending arm and pulls up with her jaws, tearing it free while her right hand slices into JJ's eye, the nails going straight through the soft flesh and pulling up the socket until it's wrenched completely free. She casts it aside and lets the wailing JJ Watson stumble away, leaking that same fluid, addled with a horrid chemical stench. Losing strength, he begins forming back into himself, his eye closing up and his suit tattered as he gripped the stump. Wendy watches him for a moment, bites at JJ's mantis arm still in between her teeth, and she spits out as she stares him down. He's breathing heavily as she walks closer, every step impactful. Well, folks, it seems I underestimated this young woman's ability to let go. I thought she'd be like my hardcore audience and just cave under the pressure of mortality. He looks up, that perfect skin cracking around the edges. But I'll tell you something, this will make for great publicity. She kicks him square in the gut, and he's sent into the air with a wheeze. As he falls down, she catches the back of his neck in her jaws with a sickening crunch, his body twitching in the air as he gasps. Looks like my time at the NFC is up, but Wendigo Wendy, I made you see what you fear, what lies beneath the static, death itself. He snaps his fingers and the lights go out across the venue, obscuring us for a moment. When they turn on, Wendy is kneeling on the ground in her normal form, exhausted, and her mask firmly back on. A stunning turn of events. Right as Wendigo Wendy had JJ in her jaws, he pulls a fast one and escapes out the back door. But I think we can all agree that while Wendy had some scrapes, it's absolutely her fight to win. I looked to Alduin, who is seething with rage, but concedes the fight is over and awards Wendy the victory. Wendy Hathel advances. We will announce the remaining participants at the end of the interval, but each has been told of their inclusion already. The tournament will recommence in 3 hours. Rest up, you'll fucking need it. Alduin storms off to the back, leaving Wendy still struggling to get up from as the crowd disperses. I debate going down there to help, but a surprising hand is offered to help her up. A Eustace D. Colta holds out a red-gloved hand, his curled smile betraying his keen and curious eyes. The guy gave off the sort of vibe one would expect from an old creepy man on public transport. You had quite the ordeal, Miss Hathel. I knew you had something special in you. I just wasn't aware of how you truly are. His voice was like silk, every syllable softly declared and hanging in the air. Wendy looked up before slapping his hands away, struggling to her feet. I know what you are and what you do, D. Colta. A single handshake from you and I could end up in the nightmare fuel Pokemon satchel you keep with you. No thanks. She walks towards him, and despite being a solid foot shorter, gets in his face and stares up at him. You come near me, I'll pull a disappearing act of my own on your juggler. Understand? He shows his teeth as he grins and he backs away, bowing deeply. I look forward to seeing your future matches. and I do hope you succeed. It would be most fortuitous if we were to meet in the pit. I think you'd play well with my menagerie." He stands and watches her as she leaves, an open door leading into the main lobby of the arena now available. Before I can process everything, his gaze locks onto me and I see something I never expected. The smile immediately dips into a low, sinister grimace. He looks at me with a hunger and a hatred I have never seen before. "Hey Sal," a voice calls behind me. I turn to see Nora in an orange and white hoodie, the hood turned up and a warm smile beaming at me, immediately disarming my sense of anxiety. When I turn back, Eustace is gone. "Oh hi, Nora Zane. You are fantastic in your bout. I knew Pancake Salat was deadly, but man, who'd have thought it'd be used too well against monsters, huh?" I stood up and felt my knees buckle, the adrenaline wearing off and the hunger overtaking me. Before I even hit the floor, Nora caught me. "Easy, big guy, I gotcha. Let's get you some food and talk, 'kay? You coming along, Neil?" Her informal nature was so unexpected from a woman I'd just seen disseminate something Asia fears across the continent. But I felt myself just naturally going with it. Neil looked and immediately busied herself with the compendium. "Oh, no. I have far too much work to do. Research for the wild card entrance and whatnot. Oh, and there's a thing that I have to attend to. Gotta speak to Alduin too about something. I'll catch you in a couple hours to go over notes, 'kay, Sal?" She looked awkward and hurried herself past as Nora stared incredulously. "Huh? Well, that was a bit odd. But no matter, let's go get some grub. I'm sure you have questions, right?" I just nodded as she took me by the arm and kept me steady as we barreled past the denizens of the audience still debating who would win scenarios, old champions and the other nightmarish spectres. The upper ring was sprawling and hard to navigate. I had no idea how Nora was so familiar with it. As we descended into the middle floor, where the vendors and entertainment was situated, we passed a bar serving strange drinks with a multitude of bottles, a beautiful Bernese mountain dog barking at the window, his big fluffy face looking at the glass, until a man pulled him away. "He's cute. Can we stop there?" I asked, feeling kind of thirsty. "Maybe they have an adrenaline drink." She looked back, a tad confused, but didn't stop as we made a beeline for the fighters-only cafeteria. "What bar?" she asked. I looked again, but in its place stood a donut stand, a surely older man dishing them out by the dozens, with a multitude of sprinkles. My mouth agape, she chuckles. "Hey, since you're so eager, I'll make you a deal. I make it through the semis, you can buy me a drink." She winked and I felt my stomach knot up. Couldn't tell if it was the hunger or butterflies, but Motormouth was very much silent for a little bit. "You're wondering why I'm taking an interest in you, right?" She called over the booming sound of the crowd and pumping metal music. I nodded. "You showed a support in me when you called my fight and when I had to defend you. Well, I looked up and thought you were cute. Got a thing for the nerdy ones. But that's not all, is there?" I asked, my head pounding as I did so. Maybe it was the music. She looked back and flashed a chinky grin. "Nope, but that's a story for another day. We gotta eat, and when you've got more interesting questions for all of us." She laughed as she watched a fighter, far too drunk for his own good, challenging a still-eating Miroslav Zanya to a fight. One side punch later, the guy was on his ass and vomiting. "All of us? What do you mean?" "The fighters! You've got to meet and interview them ahead of the semifinals and wild card, don't ya?" I shrugged and she laughed again. Man, you are clueless. No, wasn't kidding. You're doing part of her job too. I'm doing you a favor by bringing you with me. We passed a betting table showing the odds for the semifinals and wild card. Eustace and Wendy, respectively, being the odds on favorites to win. Nora and Landry, Evie being the biggest underdogs. Whatever was lurking in the booth and taking slips from paying customers, it had tendrils and shimmering red eyes. I didn't dare stare too long as we passed it. Down one more flight of stairs, and we were in the employee section housing the Nighmares, fighters, and various services like medical station, prep rooms, and the alike. One long hallway to our left was all that stood between us and some glorious smelling food. As we got halfway down, Nora pushed me to the wall and put a hand over my mouth, her slightly taller frame covering me as someone walked past. I looked to her and was about to protest, but the look on her face screamed danger. Her brow was furrowed. The calm and kind demeanor she'd shown was replaced with an instinct to protect. As I followed her gaze, I saw why. It was like watching a great black swarm that undulated into the visage of a human man with long horns, a cloak of hungry, vicious lotuses that jostled and crawled for position. The sound rippled through my ears, my eardrums threatening to burst and my skull screaming for breath as it neared. When the lotuses parted, a skull with an elongated back that stretched out horizontally, peering down at Nora, the arms on the back of the thick spine pulling at a sheathed sword on its torso. The smell of rot was so powerful that I felt my vision blur. You realize that coming back here, you've sealed your fate, and thus our deal must be concluded. It spoke in 1,000 voices at once, the boom of so many souls screaming for relief and joy and ecstasy. A bead of sweat ran down Nora's forehead as she tried to find the words. I'm aware of our agreement, and that and what it means to return. But I ask you, wait until my time in the tournament has concluded. The locusts hissed, and the cloak revealed more of his abomination. The shimmering black armor clad in gold, the powerful arms on the shoulder blades, and the hoofed feet in a worn-down, blackened, and cracked NFC belt. It turned its head to meet me, and I felt the looming shadow of death put its hands around my throat in a way I can only describe as seeing an oncoming car and veering out of harm's way, amplified 100-fold. A sensation that your life could end with one false move. This creature was a foot away from me, and we both know it could crush me in an instant. Fear doesn't begin to answer, to describe how I felt in that moment. He spoke again, silencing her. I will decide when such a contest must be undertaken, be it now, during your next bout, or when you are nearing death at the hands of Alduin. If you somehow survive your next 2 bouts, I will add you to the course where you shall remain. The lotuses covered him again, and he walked away, humming. You should have stayed forgotten. It would have been better for all. As he walked away and into the darkness, but I and Nora collapsed against the wall in a heap. It took a good couple of minutes to regain thought, and I'm man enough to admit I was shaking. What the hell was that? I breathed. Nora wiped the sweat from her head and stood up, clenching her fist. That was someone I made a deal with when I was last here. He offered me a fight I was not supposed to refuse. The penalty for leaving meant he could challenge me anytime, anywhere, under his rules. If he beats me, well, you've seen what happens. She walks with an expediently to the end of the hallway where the other fighters are waiting. Suddenly, all the terrifying and skilled talent we've seen in the tournament ebbs away. Just for a moment, she continues, the noise and ruckus of the semi-finalist drowned out by the mixture of fear and anger in her voice. Where Alduin rules the open weight division, and anyone can compete, making her the queen of the NFC. He rules the Nightmare division with an iron fist. Only the most terrifying of creatures compete for that prize and the promise of something more. She swallowed and turned to me, genuine terror in her eyes. That was Abaddon, the NFC Abyss champion, and he's coming for me. He stared at the spot where he'd once stood, beads of sweat running down her forehead, before blinking and smiling, trying to put the situation to the back of her mind as she took my arm and led me towards the bustling mess hall. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, we've got a meeting for you to attend. With that, she pushed open the doors to the semi-finalists, eagerly chowing down on food. Rex Chug was downing a 40-ounce with glee. Eustace DeCalta sat in the far corner, throwing food into a satchel and eating some soft bread. To the back lay Wendy, nursing her leg while listening to some music, a blood bag IV attached to her through a thin tube. Miroslav was undoubtedly still busy eating outside, and neither Neil nor Landry could be seen. They must still be training. Ah well, good to see you, Nora. A large bearded man in his 40s sauntered over, his black apron sporting the cheesy line, "Saturday is a day for dads." Across the front, a greasy dish rag hastily tucked into his pocket as he opened his arms for a hug, which Nora eagerly gave, which I grabbed, fear of bones being crushed immediately set aside by the warmth in which he held it. He smiled but didn't make eye contact, and when she let go, offered a gargantuan palm, blinking rapidly, which I grabbed, fear of being crushed immediately set aside by the warmth in which he held it. "Nice to meet ya. I'm Zunkel, the head chef, but you can call me Zunk. You the new guy? You must be hungry. Don't worry, I got a stromboli with your name on it. Oh, and let me know if I'm too loud. I get ASD, and I don't always know if I'm coming on too much." He chuckled nervously. Nora, patting his back, "You're fine, Zunk. We'll let you know if you become larger than life, I promise." "Sal, you want to eat, right? The stromboli is to die for. Plus, I can send the fighters over when you're ready. Sound good?" "Yeah, sure. Where are you off to?" I asked as she stretched out her arms. "I gotta train. I'll catch up with you before the interval is over, okay? You can ask me what you need to know then. Promise." Her hazel eyes shimmered in the light. I didn't know how to respond. Instead, I nodded sheepishly, and she hurried off. Zunk put his arm around me and funneled me past the fighters to get me seated. He nodded and excused himself, rummaging in the back room as he prepared the meal. "Do you remember why they let you out, Sal?" The voice is low, guttural, and fills my ears. Looking up from the table, I saw the lights flickering and rapidly going out around me. One by one, the surrounding tables were plunged into darkness, leaving only mine still dimly lit. "Do you remember what put you in there in the first place, Sal?" My body is frozen in place, like sleep paralysis, but with some limited movement of my head. The air is fetid, cold, and something is shifting in the dark, but I'm unable to see it. Whatever it is, it wants to keep its distance. But as the eyes fixed on me, I felt a surge of memories run through my mind, as if a tape was on fast forward. Scattered moments of birthdays past and happy mornings spent with loved ones, years stripped away in an instant before my head hung forward, a cold sweat dripping onto the table, while the remainder of my body remained still. Clammy, cold hands run their fingers through my hair and down my face. I feel sick. Like I'm this person's plaything. The eyes across from me stay fixated on me, and the same guttural voice growling out as I feel the hands gently push my head to look at the table. A card, a bottle, a choice. Sure enough, a face-down tarot card to be left, a piece of paper to the right, and in the center sat a bottle in the shape of a black human heart. Ventricles and veins perfectly placed, letting the dark fluid rush around its center and creating a slight steam as it bubbled from the top ventricle. The label read, "The Society of the Sunless gives unto you, the Kingmaker. With consumption he ascended to his endless throne. A beast, a bar, a voice." The higher voice chimed behind me, rife with excitement. The cycle repeats, the threat retreats, and from now on, rejoice. They kept repeating it as the drink bubbled over, the black liquid congealing on the table before thick smoke bellowed out, the card burning at the edges and the letter unfolding to show my invitation from the NFC. My head swirled, the hands gripped harder, and I felt the higher-pitched voice come up to my ear, dragging its tongue along the nape of my neck and into my ear as I shivered. "This time it will be different, we promise." The hands eased off, and my body fell to the table, jumping up to fend them off. I was face to face with Zunk, carrying a piping hot tray with stromboli and looking perplexed. "You okay, Sal? I got your stromboli. It's a specialty of mine." "Ah, yeah, I'm good, Zunk, thanks. It's actually nice to have someone who works here show hospitality." He blinked and looked down at my shoes as he spoke. "It's no trouble. Having been here a while and with a bloodied past, I know what it's like to want to start again." "Oh, did Nell tell you?" "Tell me what?" "Is the stromboli not paid for?" I quipped. He laughed heartily. No, I'm your co-commentator until Nell either wins or is boosted from the wild card. I've been here a while and I know my stuff, I promise." He tapped his fingers nervously. "I don't want you to thinking I'm just a glory hog. Nah, if Neil recommended you, then it's all good for me." I noticed that Rex was staring at me as he belched the last of his drink. Had he seen something? Let me split that with you," he bellowed, rushing over. I sighed. Of course he hadn't seen. If it wasn't a fight or something to satisfy him, I doubt he'd see much else. He was an imposing mass of muscle and brawn that on most folks would scream intimidating, especially considering that he did during his quarter-final match, but now he almost seemed chummy. "A pair of warriors should always try to dine together," he cried, slamming his fist down as Zunk awkwardly split it. "At least it's not an odd number," he mumbled, smiling to me and heading back to the kitchen. Rex stared at him as he disappeared, calling out to someone called Sancho to take over for the evening shift. As the big door swung back and forth for a moment, "Yeah, you know he's the Jersey Devil, right? Dude has a sick history. And I do mean sick." Rex smirked and he bit down into the stromboli. The look of pain on his face when he felt the burning sensation run through his mouth was priceless. "Fuck, that's hot. Ain't nothing I can't handle, though." We chatted for a while, and to my surprise, Rex was pleasant. He had a prickly personality and was, and to a degree, hot-headed, but he was passionate and dedicated to his gym. His reason for being here he wouldn't say, but promised me it was worth all the broken bones he could muster. After that, I spoke to Zanya and Eustace, neither of which giving me much info on their motivations, or techniques. Zanya slurred his words, probably from drinking, declaring state secret with a wavy hand before he moved me on. Eustace, on the other hand, repeatedly asked me if I wanted to join the order. so that I could learn his secrets. I didn't. Walking to Wendy, she sighed and bandaged her leg tighter. Anything I wanted to say has already been said. Come back to me when I'm in the finals and I'll give you the interview of a fucking lifetime, okay? I got shit to prepare for. She was frustrated. That much was obvious. But the more she stared at Eustace, the more I worried she was overlooking the talent within her own bracket. In any case, I didn't want to be a bother. I excused myself to look for the others. No Neil or Landry in sight, and the remainder of the competitors were unknown, so I cut my losses and made a beeline for the upper ring again. It took some confusing turns and repeatedly bumping into fans before I realized how lost I was. Everyone passed me by without so much as an acknowledgement. The announcement rang out that I had 30 minutes to get to my seat and to do my usual prep. To put it simply, I was mildly freaking out. Hey buddy, you look like you could use a drink. I turned and saw the same small bar from earlier, right opposite me. The door is open and the young man in his late 20s washing a cup in the doorway. He grinned as a Bernese mountain dog stood by his side, trying to get out and greet me. Droll flecks already across his cheeks as he pants with joy. Not yet, buddy. Not the right time, he said before reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small bottle wrapped in a thick black cloth. You're gonna need this. Don't open it until you're sat down. But when you do, read the instructions and keep it close. You'll thank me when the time comes. I couldn't even say anything, staring incredulously as tired but wild eyes stared back at me from beneath thick circular black glasses. He whistled, and the dog, eager as he was to see me, turned back to follow him. He leaned his head back to call to me one last time before the doors closed. Oh, and it's good to see you again, Sal. With that, the bar was shut, and I threw caution to the wind, running up the stairs and trying to retrace my steps with Nora as best as I could. Thankfully, I made it with some spare time. No Neil sat by my side, but her book was propped up on the chair, and I know she wanted me to protect it. The lights dimmed, and Alduin resumed her spot in the center of the pit. With a swell of pride bubbling within her, the mic expertly in hand as the screen descended. Twisted Freaks of Nature, I welcome you back to the NFC Overweight Semifinals and the competitors for the wild card. I hope you're ready. The crowd shows their approval as the screen starts filling in the black boxes underneath Wendy and now faded out JJ Watson. She's a bona fide killer from a bygone age. She finds, tracks, and eliminates Crips without prejudice. One half of our commentary team and burning desire to fight one special member of our roster, the Huntress, Madame Nell Lockwood. Nell took a bow and kept her expression neutral. She was focused and determined. Next up is someone we just had to give a chance to after we reviewed his unique case. He's our first interviewer and a true warrior of his clan, Landry Evie. Landry sheepishly waved as he adjusted his shorts, stretching out his calf muscles. Now, it wouldn't be the NFC without some surprises, folks. Our first is a surprise even to me, but during the break, I gave an audience to two unexpected individuals. One who's come back from the dead, and another who, well, you'll see. First up, he somehow returned from the depths of hell itself and achieved a true nirvana state. Wong Zoe! Sure enough, a scarred impaler Wong walks from the dugout and bows deeply. The veins on his muscles are black and his skin is almost translucent, but he radiated strength. Last but no means least is an individual who made a point of entering when I informed him that he could not simply get into the main tournament, even with his credentials. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a NFC Abyss champion, Abdon. I couldn't believe my eyes. The champion of Nightmares, the same fucking thing that came inches to my face and threatened to take out Nora when he saw fit, was now involving himself in this. The sounds of those lotus tore at my eardrums, even from this distance, as he walked into the pit and took off his broken, blackened belt to hold high for all to see. Alduin was beside herself with joy and bloodlust. The notion of champ versus champ must have been like ambrosia to her and to the crowd. With that, the wild card roster was set, and we were due to get a match from each to kick things back off. Zunk came and took a seat next to me, his extremely large frame actually putting me at ease from any more potential would-be threats. "You ready to do this, partner?" he said, nervous, eyes darting all around and breathing heavily. But he nodded as I pushed record. Alduin took to the mic right on cue. "Let's not waste any more time then. Bring out the next competitors." Wong stayed in his spot and stared down the elevator, whirling and coming to a stop. What rushes out is horrifying to behold. The golden beak, beady little black eyes, wiry bowl hair with a bald spot on the front, and long thick claws on each digit. A Kappa. NFC wildcard opening match. Wong Zoe versus the Kappa. It didn't wait for Alduin to finish her announcement or to get out of the way. It simply rushed forward with the absolute desire to eviscerate in mind. I suffered the greatest shame and pain to get back here. I was devoured by the great beast, humiliated by the whore of Babylon, all my teachers mounting to nothing. I climbed the tower and followed the thread. I am here now because of my perseverance. Wong spoke with such calm elegance, his stance remaining neutral, a hand behind his back and standing upright. The Kappa did not stop charging. It passed Wong and in that instant fell to the floor. Its head began dragged by the momentum before it slammed into the opposite wall and coated it in thick green fluid. It turned furious and charged again. Wong adjusted his stance and outstretched a fist towards the beast, furrowing his brow. "Come into my range and you'll return to dust." But the Kappa persisted, and the moment it was within a couple of feet, one large shot rang out that was so fierce a small gust of wind blew up and threatened to knock my papers. When the dust cleared, the Kappa lay in a heap with its entire skull concave, twitching on the ground as Wong prayed for a moment before returning to the dugout, unfazed. Zunk shouted, realizing his volume was a little too loud and sitting back from the mic. "Man, Sal, you gotta admire the growth of this guy." "That's right, Zunk. From complete shutout against the NFC open weight pet Gastakuro to decimating his enemy with one dodge and incredible punch, I'd say Wong Zoe has done more than enough to redeem himself in the eyes of the NFC and fight for his spot in the open weight tourney." Alduin perched on the fence after the Kappa's charge, followed Wong with her gaze as he sat down. He definitely piqued her curiosity. She leapt down and leaned back as she shouted at the top of her lungs. "Wong advances in our second wildcard match on With the Violence." This time it was Miroslav Zanya taking point. He looked, for lack of a better word, wasted as hell, stumbling around and lackadaisical. It was very out of character for the usually stoic Dagestani. Still, he went into his usual position and seemed to have composure as Alduin announced his opponent emerging from the elevator. "Our first semi-finalist is the Dagestani super soldier, Miroslav Zanya, but his opponent will certainly be a test for him. Not physically, but mentally. The Kikamura." What emerged stood on thick and red chicken legs, A basic dress, white shirt, and a babushka hood, covering the long black hair as two horns protruded from the base of the skull. Its skin was burnt, charred, and blackened, the eyelids completely stripped away and leaving bulging, milky, white eyes in its wake. The lips were pink and cut, rows of white pillar teeth hiding just behind it. The lower jaw sporting three large, bulbous sacs with pucellated sacs that pulsated. It moved as if it was a flickering image, hard to keep focus on the more clarity the lights gave it. It felt wrong to stare at it for long, despite it being my job. NFC Openweight Semifinals. Miroslav Zanya versus the Kikamura. Begin. The Kikamura flickered closer to Zanya, and something immediately felt wrong. Zanya had his head bowed in the exact same way he'd done in his previous fight, but I could see no motion or movement from him. The closer the Kikamura got, the more my anxiety and fear grew. This thing was going to rip him to pieces. Grabbing the compendium, I flicked through until I fell upon the entry detailing what the Kikamura did. It was definitely a Russian demon that invaded dreams, but it had to physically touch you in order to intact its abilities. So why was Zanya not taking advantage? Then I remember seeing him in the bar earlier, his slurred responses during the interview. I wondered, "Hey Zunk, do people sabotage fighters or fights here?" He scoffed. "Do I make a good Stromboni?" Yes, they do. It's sometimes outside interest looking to make a bet, an old grudge or what? I pressed. He looked uncomfortable as he pulled at his sleeve, a grimace forming on his face. Or they want their spot in the tourney, by any means necessary. The Kikamura wrapped its hands around Zanya's arms, and the nails dug deep into his flesh, pulling him up. I was expecting him to headbutt, fight back, or even go into that usual rage state he displayed for us before, but instead my worst fears were confirmed. He was paralyzed, his body a mere puppet for this horrific creature to play with. I watched in horror as the Kikamura's eyes grew wider and the lips parted to open the jaw. It pulled at his skin until separation was made. What looked like a wisp of smoke emerged, and the Kikamura eagerly grabbed it with a free hand and devoured it, dropping Zanya to the floor and screeching as the crowd cheered. Well, would you look at that, folks? Our semi-finalists eliminated, and it wasn't even a fight. What the hell happened to that super soldier power? Alduin seemed amused, laughing as the Kikamura went back to the elevator and descended, licking his lips. Zanya lay on the ground, eyes white and no movement. Why didn't it finish him? Was it feeling generous? Zunk asked, leaning forward to look down at him. I trembled in my seat and closed the book, taking a sip of water with shaking hands in the fear of what this tournament and its alumni could do if they wanted. It didn't finish him. The Kikamura eats souls, not bodies. Someone wanted Zanya vulnerable, and they got it. As the next two competitors took the pit, I remember the bottle I had in my possession, and I unfolded the cloth, realizing just how much I may need this in the other bouts. It was a silver bottle with a chain around it, ice cold to the touch, with a combination lock over the cap, and the code written on the inside of the cloth. A small note just beneath it. Professor Ambrose Ashton Smith's silver tear potion. Your cycle shall not end as long as you keep this close. 1 glass for injury, 2 for death. You'll know when the time is right. Good luck and protect them, Kraus.